One of the most important wealth preservation vehicles that the affluent like to consider here is trusts. So let's dive into it and talk about what this could mean to you here. So trusts are used for control, protection, and privacy, and in some circumstances, they can create significant tax savings. We see a lot of our clients use this for estate planning, which is really well integrated into the tax planning, but also there are some additional tax reduction strategies. But let's talk about how this can apply to you in the very basics here. Now, before I get started, I want to give you guys just a little bit of backstory here on who this is going to be most important for. This is going to be really important for those of you who are thinking about their estates and estate planning, but also for those of you with risk exposure, those of you with lots of assets, entrepreneurs, business owners, and real estate investors. Another thing to consider here, I'm a CPA, tax strategist. We talk about trusts and entity structuring all the time, but there's a whole universe of ideas out there regarding trusts and all sorts of opinions and all sorts of amalgamations and all sorts of different outlooks you're going to get on how to properly set up your entities and your trusts. And there are people who dedicated their careers and their lives to it. And some of them will say different solutions for the same person. So it is a little bit tricky navigating what's the best solution for you when we start talking about, in particular, asset protection and a trust structure here. But I'm going to hopefully give you some insight to get you started, really get the ball rolling here on what is a trust, what can it do for you, and what you should start thinking about. So one of the things I want you to think about here is you have different types of trusts. The most common ones that we see or vocabulary you're going to hear is a revocable living trust. Some may call this a starter trust. And this helps you in particular, what we see with a lot of folks where they wish they had this in place is avoid probate. And anyone who has had to deal with going through probate to acquire assets can tell you what a pain in the neck it can really be. It could take months or years to get the assets out of the estate when someone is passed. Also, these trusts are going to help you with mitigating the estate taxes when you inherit assets. You can see some prior episodes where you could wind up paying taxes on as much as 40% of the assets past certain thresholds. And as we're awaiting tax legislation, I don't really know what that threshold is going to be for you by the time you're listening to this. But certainly for those of you with lots of assets, this can be incredibly important for the preservation of your wealth and creating that multi-generational wealth for your children to inherit and their children's children. We have irrevocable trust where it removes assets from your estates. We see many people using the irrevocable trust for asset protection, tax minimization, and long-term control. So you can put the trust and have a trustee. You can have a beneficiary, but you can change who is the beneficiary throughout time. And then we have grantor trusts, or you may have heard of intentionally defective grantor trusts. You can put assets outside of your estate. This is popular with wealthy families doing advanced estate planning. We have charitable trusts, which are really can be really impactful with creating tax savings. And you see this with lots of affluent people, in particular with capital gains planning, where you have a major capital gains event, or maybe you're selling your company and you put it in a trust and you're kind of creating an endowment where the funds are going to go to a charity at your date of death, and that gives you an immediate write-off and also helps you avoid the capital gains because the funds are in this trust and it has this sort of charitable structure to it. And now because you don't pay capital gains on the transaction, you have more access to the money you put in. To simplify this, let's say you have highly appreciated stocks. So a lot of people who are founders or have tech stocks, let's say your basis is 100 and it's worth 10 million. You put it into this charitable trust and you get an immediate tax deduction, and then the gains inside of it are tax advantaged because it's going to charity. And then now you have this big bucket of untaxed capital gains assets and cash that can be reinvested, and you see the opportunities, the benefits, the economic benefits of the money in that trust. There are all sorts of special purpose trusts for protecting your heirs, and that some will go to creditors, medical trusts, qualified personal residence trusts, and dynasty trusts. There's so much to talk about. We could have 100 podcast episodes on trusts. We could write millions and millions of pages on trust, and there's just so much to uncover here. But I want to talk about some of the very basics of what should matter to our audience here. The most common reasons we see folks starting trust is to avoid probate. It's private, it's fast, especially when we have real estate in multiple states, so your heirs can inherit your assets. Asset protection. Now, this is a really important one. So when you put your business into an LLC, you are hopefully, if everything is structured right, when you put your money into the LLC, your risk exposure is limited to that which is in the LLC for that business. So for instance, I have an LLC, right? And I'm operating some sort of operation, and the LLC, not me, gets sued for $5,000 or let's say $100,000. The LLC could be liable, but not me. So they can go after the LLC and its assets. They can't go after my personal assets. They can't go after my truck, my house, my car. That is shielded because the LLC is the operation and not me personally. Now, there's some limitations to this that people may overlook. There's something that we would call the reverse piercing of the corporate veil. So let's say you get in a car accident, or they find a workaround through the LLC and they find a way to sue you directly. And now they have some sort of way, for whatever reason, maybe it's because of some personal liability or because they find holes in your LLC and your asset protection structure. They're now going after you personally and your personal LLCs. Well, sorry, you personally and your personal assets. So if they're going through your personal assets, the trust is going to allow you protection because you don't own your assets. If you could put your assets in the trust and have everything in the ownership of your trust, you create an additional layer where they cannot go after your assets because they would have to sue the trust and not you personally. Now, I've seen so many unique formations of these trusts. I've seen them leveraging international laws. I've seen something called a revocable bridge trust, where they cut the bridge between you and your assets in another country so they can never get to them. There's all sorts of unique and creative ways. You can wind up spending anywhere from $500 to $50,000 of what I've seen quotes for our clients for asset protection structures. Really make sure before you even consider these ideas that it is appropriate for the level of risk you have. Do not invest into a very elaborate asset protection structure just to protect your 2016 Hyundai Elantra. All right, even if this guy is presenting at a conference and you're going to make a lot of money in the future, and you know that this is the guy and they have a limited once in a lifetime opportunity for their special super duper platinum magnum trust within a trust and dynasty, blah 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 blah. Really make sure before you write that check that this is appropriate for you and your situation, and also that you understand what they're going to do with you. For tax reduction here, we talked about some charitable deduction strategies. There are ways that we can also shift income into different brackets, and eventually, when you have inheritance, time the way by which we take assets out of these trusts that are serving for inheritance vehicles and distribute them to other folks. By the way, also with that, there are some advanced gifting strategies for those of you interested in estate planning. Another thing that I really want you to think about here is legacy planning. So you can control how your wealth is distributed even long after you're gone. So for instance, you can say, hey, well, after my kids turn 30, they'll have access to these funds. So really having a long-term game plan for what's going to happen with this wealth inside of the trust. We talked about it earlier on the level of asset protection, but another thing we don't want to overlook is the level of privacy. So when someone wants to, especially for those of you listening who may be recognizable on the internet, we do have folks who are easily searchable, and maybe they're talking about their successes, and they're syndicators and they've had multi-million-dollar exits, and they're sharing and educating people how to do it. Those people, wait until something goes wrong, your investors may want your head on a stick. Or let's say there's some possibility of you getting sued, and they want to, or maybe they want to sue your LLC. Maybe they want to sue your investment, the owner of your investment property. They don't know who it is. The trust, by having the trust own this LLC, or the trust own your assets, it provides anonymity because they're going to see the trust as the owner of the LLC and not you in particular. Now, there's some limitations here, and I'm not an asset protection specialist or an attorney, nor will I pretend to be one on this episode, but certainly these are things to consider, especially when the stakes are high or there is some form of risk exposure here. So other things that we've seen trusts be used for is business succession, to keep the business is just another asset we want to keep out of probate, and plan for the succession of who takes on the business and who takes on shares of whatever business and assets you're going to leave to your heirs. We also see for a handful of folks use trust as an alternative to a prenup, and to protect themselves against potentially having a messy divorce, or making sure that their assets are protected in that situation, or in other types of business partnership arrangements. Some common misperceptions are that trusts are only for the ultra wealthy, and they're not. If you own real estate or a business of any kind, or have kids, you probably need one, thinking long term. And I'll say one thing that I've seen from seeing many probates take forever is you usually don't realize this until it's too late. Another misperception is that they're too expensive. There are ways to do this in a much more cost-effective manner, especially for those of you who don't have intensive needs here. So you can still consider this with someone, a local attorney or specialist here. Some other things to think about is you may be concerned that you lose control of your assets when you put the funds into the trust, but revocable trusts give you full control until you're gone, and then and then after death it goes into this irrevocable trust where there's a detailed plan on what's going to happen with that. So as far as next steps, I want you to just be aware that this is a thing that you should be thinking about. Most of you listening here, if you're attracted to the podcast and this stuff is relevant to you, you most likely need the trust. And we're not qualified to set it up. We're tax nerds, but we have had lots of conversations, and we can assist you in these conversations and seeing how this may impact your tax planning objectives and needs, compliance of filings, and everything else. One thing to add here, when we see our clients put their assets and businesses into trusts, you may be concerned about the complexities of the tax filings and the tax treatments. A lot of the times we're going to find that the trusts are these invisible entities where there's not really any reporting to do at all, because it's just a shield between you and your assets. You're not going to, if you have, for instance, if you're investing in a partnership or other assets going through in receiving a K1, the K1 is still written to you directly, even though it's owned by a trust, because the trust is not going to be subject to tax liabilities or Social Security taxes. It's all still calculated at the individual level, in particular when we have the revocable trust. So you're likely to see that pretty much the same exact tax treatment and filing obligations from our side. But on your side, you're likely going to need to perform additional procedures to maintain the trust. All right. And if any of this stuff sounds interesting to you, we can help connect you with some of our resources who know a lot more about this than us. And if you want us to collaborate with your resource on trust planning for tax savings, anonymity, wealth preservation, estate planning, asset protection, feel free to reach out to us at prosperalcpa.com. taxplanningchecklist.com/apply or take our free mini course at taxplanningchecklist.com. Have a wonderful day.